Um, Hello, my name is Jasper. This is just a quick video I've thrown together on how to change over from ph2.0 to A30 or BT2.0 on the 1S 300 milliamp hour batteries. It will be the same for different brands other than this one, but it's just down to the fixing of the connector. Um, these batteries are Tattoo 1S 300 milliamp hours. That are currently on ph2.0s just because I bought the wrong ones and couldn't get any different ones. But I'm changing them over to A30 just because that's what I can currently get hold of. But it will be exactly the same for BT 2.0. Um, just I went for A30. To start off with, all I'm doing is just taking some side cutters or cutters and I'm cutting along the top, as you can see in the video. Make two slits either side, um, and then two slits down at the top to remove those two pieces that I've just kind of made a slit into. Don't go too far down, you will cut the battery. Um, and don't want to do that. So I'm just removing these kind of like the corners off this. Doesn't matter if I'm not bothered about destroying the plugs because I'm never going to use them again. But if you're interested in reusing them, don't go too close to them and don't cut them. You can see that I've taken off the corners. I do remove the stickers. It just makes life easier in removing the like rubber epoxy type coating stuff. Um, you can put them back on afterwards, or you can leave them off. It does make them easier to go into the battery trays with them off, so I just leave them off when all of the same. Next, I put the cutters alongside and cut off the remaining little bit that sticks out, but I'm not really cutting it. I grip onto it and kind of peel it back a little bit. That ensures I don't actually cut the battery. Um, and you can see I kind of just like tear it off. I don't. You can just cut it off, but you risk again cutting into the top of the foil of the battery. So I just kind of peel them off, um, and that will remove the sides of the batteries completely. As you can see there, I peeled and then cut it off, and so you're left with it missing in a lot of places. I very carefully bend the battery forward a little bit, just just a tiny bit, and this back piece isn't held on by much anymore, and you can pull it away with just your fingers or some really small pliers if you're careful, without damaging, and it just kind of pulls away and takes off that entire back section. It just leaves you with now just the front bit. Again, the front bit I very carefully just bend it ever so slightly. You don't want to bend it too much, you do risk damaging them. Bend it, and then I can get thumbnails under there, or you can use like a plastic tool. Don't use anything metal to shove under there, and you just want to pry it up a little bit and bend it forwards. And you can see both your positive and negative terminals there. Um, Underneath, now these connectors they do have wires in between. So I cut off just this little bit at the bottom. This bit here it depends on battery. Some of them are secured more than others, but what I'm doing is trimming away as much of this rubber as I can without touching anything else. Just cutting away the rubber. Um, and I'm going down here. I'm going down the side of the terminals. I'm not cutting the wires. I'm not cutting the plug or anything. It's just to get rid of this rubber stuff. Um, so yeah, and again, I'm just taking off as much material as I can to free them up. I don't want to be too aggressive with them. You don't want to start bending them or trying to pull it off. You do risk shorting because the terminals are loose inside that film coating. Now I'm running along down the side of the wire, but very carefully I'm only cutting the width of one terminal. Again, if you go the width of two, you can risk shorting with the pliers. And now I've cut off that little bit, it should just pull off. It will be stuck to the yellow like insulating tape, but you can just pull it off like I've done there. I now just remove all that film that is used to insulate the terminals. Um, One thing I will say is be careful here. I did find a problem with these batteries where the strands where they spot weld the wires on are loose. They're not all spot welded, and you do risk arcing between them. That's not like your fault for taking them apart. It's just a defect from the batteries. I now very, very carefully cut off each terminal one at a time from each side. Don't try and reach across. Don't try and obviously don't do them both at the same time, one at a time. And now what I'm doing here with my thumbs, I'm just removing those strands, because like I said, they're not all spot welded, and some of the batteries have been coming out fine. I've done 15 at this point, and some of them are not. There is a lump of hard resin plastic type stuff that's in that it's hard to see. There is one there. I remove it because it doesn't really serve a purpose, and I'm going to be putting glue in there anyway. It just takes up space and doesn't help. So you'll see me get it away. Now this, I just use, again, you could use a thin piece of plastic or your thumbnail, just something that's not going to puncture that cell or damage it. And obviously don't, careful with those terminals because you don't want them to touch. And there, it's done. You got 2 terminals, all stripped. Right, so this is the next part. Now we've got the batteries. I haven't done anything really between the 2 steps. That's flux. I always solder with flux. Personal opinion. I always do it. I clean it up afterwards. But so now what I'm doing is tinning each terminals. Don't put too much heat into this. You want to be in there fairly quick on a fairly high heat. Tin them. You want to get that solder into those strands so that they don't become loose, and they're just it's tinned ready for the connector. As you can see, both terminals are tinned. Again, don't short out the terminals. Your soldering iron will short them out quite quickly and easily if you try and reach across both. You only need to tin the back side, not the front. But once they are tinned, you can fold the terminals down onto that. It's like a paper film, and sit them fairly flush. It's not too crucial. You will end up moving them again, but you don't want to bend them loads because you can risk them snapping off. Here I've got the A30 connector. There are 2 flat spots. I personally always put the flat spots to the side. This is just because the solder will naturally want to sink into those flat spots, and when they're next to each other like that, it's more likely that they will bridge than if they're on the side. So I just always set them to the sides, tin them on the side, and then solder down like that. I haven't had a problem since doing it that way. You still got to be careful because they are really close to each other. But so you can see that I'm twisting with some pliers. And then obviously make sure you get the polarity the right way round. I've just cut the video here, but I tin each terminal. A little bit of flux again. So I'm just tinning these terminals. Now I'm going to put the connector onto the battery. just make sure you get it the right way around. You obviously will have a really horrible time if you don't. I start off with one terminal. I just get it so it holds. I do not get a full connection. So again, with a little bit of solder size, you can see that it's now just stuck. I'm not happy with that solder joint completely, but it's just to hold it when I go in to do the other side, and now it's less likely to move. Well, it won't move. Oh, as you can see, I go back in with some flux. It just makes life a hell of a lot easier when soldering if you use flux. Clean it off afterwards, but it just makes the solder flow a lot nicer. It doesn't make it go spiky. I am using flux to solder as well, but the flux burns off on the solder before you actually get to the battery. So as you can see, I've gone back on that other terminal to create a good join. As you can see there, both terminals are soldered on, and it all looks good. Right, now I'm just cleaning off the flux, so this is just some isopropyl alcohol. Just a little cotton bud with some isopropyl alcohol on it, and just cleaning off all the flux. Flux will make a difference when coming to glue. It might cause the glue not to stick properly, or flux generally will try and corrode stuff. It's pretty horrid. Depends on the type of flux you use, but certain fluxes will cause your terminals to corrode. When you're happy with the cleaning, it's all basically done. Now it's time to glue up the terminals. As you can see, where I left them off last time. So I bend the terminals back a little bit, and I'm going in with a cotton bud with water on it. Now that's solely because the glue that I'm using to start with is water activated. If yours isn't, don't do this step. So I'm ever so slightly going over a little bit of water. The piece of the paper tape at the bottom really helps out because it soaks up just a touch, not a lot of water, and that just holds it. It won't cause it to have a problem. And that's glue I'm using. It's this Gorilla Glue expanding, and I'm only using a little bit, but I want to go underneath those terminals. Just put a bit under there. And so underneath, I will go on top as well. Press the connector back down so it's square. And I will go on the other side because there are still two bare terminals there. You are going to want to hold this in the position you want it to dry in, because once that glue's set, it's stuck basically. And that's the first part of the glue done. Right, so final bit, I'm using this Gorilla contact adhesive. It's a glue that dries rubbery in consistency. As you can see, the previous glue has gone dried, expands, and it dries hard. So it just gives you that, so it expands in around the terminals and insulates them. I'm using a piece of heat shrink. It's ever so slightly bigger than the battery size, and all I'm going to be doing is putting on a connector onto the end. I have removed one of the pins so it can't short out, and so now I'm putting this glue in all of the gaps around where the previous glue was, and onto the actual battery itself. I'm just going all the way around. filling any of the gaps and holes. I'm putting more than I need on, but I'd rather put more on and take off excess than not have enough, because it's a pain to get it back in once the heat shrink started going. So now I'm sliding on the heat shrink. I twist it as I push it round, and that's just to bring the glue inside it. And I'm using a dry cotton bud just to remove the bulk excess. I'm now using a rework station. You can use anything to shrink the heat shrink, it's just this works really well for heat shrink. And I'm evenly shrinking the sides and the top. It's going to push out a fair amount of glue as it shrinks, but that's why I've put that dummy cap on the end of the connector. And now I'm just going in again and removing all the excess glue that's being pushed out. And again, this glue, it dries as a rubber rather than going hard, so it gives it a lot of strength and it will still allow it to take an impact. Whereas the glue that was first put on dries hard, and that gives it strength around the terminals. Once I've removed the excess, I just pull off the dummy cap. The connector's nice and clean, and yeah, it's done. This is just a quick little one. This is an original tattoo. This has actually got a BT2.0 connector on it. This is my previous batteries that start to die. It's just a little strength test. You can see the flex in the connector on this one. The ones I've made here. You can see that it's nowhere near as much bend as the other ones before. Just a quick little thing about how they are sturdy, strong, and yeah, I'm happy with them. That's all.